Today is the 25th of October, 2011. We're at the New York State Military Museum. My name is Wayne Clark. Sir, for the record, would you please state your full name and date and place of birth, please?
Donald A. Curtis. I was born in Johnstown, New York, January 18th, 1924.
And did you attend school in Johnstown?
I did.
Did you graduate from high school?
Yes, Johnstown High School, class of 1942.
When you graduated, did you go into the military right away, or did you?
We all knew that we had our choice up until our 19th birthday, and I wanted to be in the mountain infantry, so I waited until November and then I enlisted.
All right. And why did you pick the mountain infantry?
Because I'd been a skier since I was 8 years old.
And how did you hear about the mountain infantry?
I had friends that were already at Camp Hale.
Mm-hmm. And when exactly did you go into the service?
I went in December 11th, 1942, and got my basic training at Fort Jackson in South Carolina with the 100th Infantry Division.
Mm-hmm. Was that your first time away from home?
No, I'd been away from home often. We went to Maine every year and up to Sodas on Lake Ontario, so I'd been away from home.
Mm-hmm. Now that picture you're holding there, let me zoom in on that. When and where was that taken?
That was taken at Ullern, at Smestad School in Oslo, Norway.
Oh, okay. All right, you can set that down. Now, once you've completed your basic training, well, your basic training itself, was that an infantry basic?
Yes, it was. It was with the 398th Infantry Regiment in Fort Jackson, but my enlistment guaranteed my being transferred to Camp Hale.
And what was your training like at Camp Hale?
Well, the mountain infantry training was the most arduous training of any unit in the Army. We were on ration and a half. It was so tough.
Mm-hmm. Now, when did you arrive at Camp Hale?
In the third week of March, 1943.
And how long were you there for?
I was there until we left, which was July. We were already alerted for overseas, and we left for England in July of 1943.
Okay. And do you want to tell me about your training at Camp Hale? I know it was pretty arduous.
Well, the level was 7,500 feet at the base level, and we went up to 10,006, mm-hmm. Almost on a daily routine. Mm-hmm. And we carried anywhere up to 90 pounds. There was an old song, 90 pounds of rucksack, a pound of rubber too. You'll shush the mountain like your daddy used to do. And it was just very arduous.
Uh-huh. Now what about snow on the mountain?
Well, when I got there, the winter training was all over. Uh-huh. I got the mountain training for the whole spring and part of the summer, but I didn't have any of the ski training. Mm-hmm. But I already was a skier, so that didn't matter to me.
Now, part of their winter training, did they train with snowshoes too? Or?
Yes, they used snowshoes, and certainly they had special mountain infantry skis mm-hmm. that used bear trap bindings, and you could drop the heel clamp, and they became a cross-country ski rather than an alpine ski. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of a combination dual ski.
Okay. How would those skis compare with skis today?
There just is no comparison. Mm-hmm. They're like two pieces of lumber.
Uh-huh. They were a lot longer than...
Yes, they were 7 feet, most of them, and very clumsy.
Mm-hmm. Now, what type of care did you have to do with the skis? I mean, I've seen photos of people putting wax and...
Well, you have to wax according to the temperature of the snow, or the skis stuck.
Oh.
So special waxes would...
for different temperatures?
Yes.
Oh. Okay.
And then you also had stuff called climbing skins. You could put these on over the bottom of your ski, and they stuck, so you didn't slide backwards when you tried to climb.
Mm-hmm.
So the climbing skins made climbing easier.
Okay. When would the snowshoes be used as opposed to the skis
In
then?
deep snow.
In really deep snow.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Now, the equipment and clothing that you trained with, did you find it adequate?
Yeah, it was all white. We everything was covered in white. Our pack was covered, our whole body, and for some reason our skis weren't white, and I don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
Some were. They had some painted skis that were all white, but basically we were white. Except, how do you make an M1 white? Yeah, it, sort of.
Now you were trained to be like a mountain infantryman?
Yeah, I was a lead scout.
Mm-hmm.
The problem that we had there is that I was 19 years old, and the average age of the Norwegians that I was with was 33. So consequently, when it came to a lot of energetic work, the young guys got to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And they,
Okay.
I felt like a foreigner among all these Norwegians. We didn't cover that before, but in the U.S. Army there were three national battalions. One was the 98th Greek, the 99th Norwegian, and the 100th Japanese, or Nisi Battalion, which, just for information's, it is the most decorated battalion in the history of the U.S. Army.
Mm-hmm.
These Japanese, of course, were treated so badly in California and transferred into prison that the young Japanese boys that were in service were so determined to make Japan worthy of being an American,
mm-hmm.
that they just were incredible soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
And they deserve all kinds of credit. The 99th Battalion, of which I was with, the Norwegians, were 3 times recommended for a presidential citation. But with 600 battalions on that line, everybody deserved recognition. So I guess it was like a lottery.
Mm-hmm. Now, once you left Camp Hale, were you assigned to the Norwegian unit?
I was at Camp Hale. I became part of C Company,
Okay.
99th Infantry Battalion. I was the lead scout of the 3rd Squad, 3rd Platoon. You could say 3rd Company, but it was C Company, of course.
And you were one of the few that didn't speak Norwegian?
I didn't speak a word of Norwegian, and many of them didn't speak a word of English. It was kind of a confusion, and my own feeling was that I should have been put in the 90th Regiment, which was forming.
Mm-hmm.
But Army rules and regulations are very hard to change, and I was assigned to the 99th, and they were alerted, so I was stuck.
Now, what were your officers and NCOs like?
Well, we had Major Hansen, who was head of the battalion, who was a great officer.
Mm-hmm.
Just everybody loved him. He was a great guy.
And I imagine
And a great leader. But the Army, of course, wouldn't let a battalion go without a West Point commander, so we received in England a colonel by the name of William, oh God, I can't think of his name.
Okay. Well, let me just go back a little bit before you got to England. Once you finished up at Camp Hale, how did you get over to England? Did you get any kind of...
We came by train to Camp Shanks in New York and shipped out of there for England and landed in Scotland.
Did you get any kind of leave before you went over?
I had leave after I got to Camp Hale that I was entitled to from Fort Jackson. the leave that everybody gets when they finish their basic. And I came home in the middle of May till the end of May.
Okay. All right. Now, when you went over to England, did you go in convoy or single ship?
No, we went in the largest convoy that had ever started at that time. It was unloading in Scotland when we loaded in New York.
Mm-hmm.
It was that long.
And your entire unit went over?
Yes.
As a group?
Our full battalion went over and landed at Glasgow.
All right. And how long were you in Glasgow for?
About 10 minutes, I think.
Oh.
It wasn't long. We were immediately on a train and headed into England.
And whereabouts did you go in England?
The Salisbury Plain,
Mm-hmm.
with 3 million other Americans.
And what did you do there?
We trained on the moors.
Now, what was the date you arrived in England, approximately?
I'm going to have to guess it would be the second week of July. It may have been the third.
Okay.
I'm vague on that.
Okay. And that was in 43?
At 43.
All right. And it was more training there?
Yes, we did intensive training. Of interest was that we were given a short break to go inspect Stonehenge.
Oh.
And at that point, nobody knew what Stonehenge was.
Uh-huh.
Somebody said it was Druid, and somebody said it was a calendar, and there was a lot of confusion, but it wasn't roped off or limited. We could go climb on the rocks and do what no one can get anywhere near it today.
Yeah.
It's very well protected.
Hmm.
But we had full liberty of Stonehenge.
All right. When did you leave that area?
Well, we went from Tidworth, which is a village in Salisbury, and we went from there to the Glenelg area of Wales,
Mm-hmm.
and we stayed there for about a month, and then we were moved to Ludlow on the Welsh-English border, which was a fascinating castle and made a castle freak out of me.
Mm-hmm.
I just have adored castles ever since.
Uh-huh. And more training in Wales?
And we did training on the Welsh-English border.
Mm-hmm.
But Ludlow was very nice. I liked it there.
Now, would you say with all that training, you were in probably the best shape of your life?
Yeah, we did the ration test for both the British and the American Army. Each company of the 99th got a different ration. And we turned down the British 2-pound ration as not being sufficient. The American C ration was the best. Mm-hmm. And our K ration, the most mobile, was the easiest to supply. And that became the major ration for the D-Day operation.
Mm-hmm.
And it was because of our battalion that these were tested and decided on what rations they were going to use.
Okay. All right. Where did you go from Wales?
We went down to Plymouth and were in hold for the D-Day operation. Mm-hmm. And before we could embark and get over there, the big storm occurred off of the channel, and we were held up for probably a week. They just couldn't land anybody but the emergency personnel. Mm-hmm. But our assignment was we were reserved for the 2nd and 5th Rangers that landed at Point du Hoc and captured it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and you eventually did?
We landed, there seems to be a difference of opinion. I believe that we landed on the 17th of June. I think the command landed on the 21st of June. And what the difference is, I don't know. We went into quarters at Insigne on the continent and kind of assembled there. And it was very interesting that the 2nd and 5th Rangers and the 82nd and 101st Airborne that were so disseminated from the D-Day landings that many of their stragglers wound up with us. And one of my best friends was a Gerald Plank, who was a second ranger, and he stayed with our battalion all the way. And had his papers transferred and became a member of the 99th Battalion.
When did you first see action with the enemy?
We assembled an assault force with what was left of the Rangers and the Airborne plus the 99th Battalion, and we were moved into position close to Cherbourg, and assaulted both St. Pierre-Église and the port of Cherbourg. My squad took the Normandy Pier, and we held the port for 4 or 5 days while the Seabees and the engineers cleared the harbor, and this became the main source of supply for the U.S. Third Army when they broke out at St. Lo.
At that point, did your unit suffer many casualties?
To none that I know of. The Germans that were in Cherbourg at that point were basically supply or port people. And there were a few of the coastal gunners who had no defense from the rear, so they just surrendered. And some of, I think our A company was on the coastal side. The C company was in the middle and B on the left. And when we went into Cherbourg, we went in on the railroad, and that was the main line from Cherbourg to Paris. And members of C company captured the hotel and the railroad station, and our squad went on to the Normandy Pier. But it was, once we were in Cherbourg, we had various duties to perform. We guarded the hotel, or the hospital, I mean, and that was just full of German prisoners that had been wounded. So we did have some duty there, but
any problems or incidents?
None at Cherbourg that I can recall, other than it was an easy assault. But it was an indoctrination, and that was good. It was well organized and well carried out.
And where did you go next?
We went southwest out of Cherbourg on foot, and marched and skirmished all the way to Coutances and Barneville. They were on the west side of the Cotentin Peninsula. The Germans still held the two islands, Jersey and Guernsey. So they had to have protection for the people rebuilding the rail line and the roads from Cherbourg to supply. And so we had an important mission for really a holding mission. And the Germans did try to assault from Guernsey, and they landed near Coutances, and our A company repulsed them. But it was a worthy thing. And at this point, the breakthrough was organized at St. Lo, and we were attached to the 2nd Armored Division as armored infantry now. And we went through from breaking through at St. Lo. We were the defense element that held the city of Mortain and kept the Germans in the Falaise pocket from being able to shut off the progress of U.S. Third Army. So it was a very important mission.
Were you still being utilized as a scout at that point?
Well, not really, because we were in a defensive position. So while I had a forward position, we really got off pretty easy. The Germans were badly beaten at this point. and didn't mount much of an offense. 30th Division was with us, and they did repulse a heavy assault, but we were not heavily hit, just minor, and a lot of mortars and that kind of stuff.
How long were you in that area for?
I would think maybe 2 days, and then the breakout was complete at that point, and First Army joined it. Third Army was already into Brittany, and First Army turned to the east, and we went through Dome Front to just south of Falaise, and then from there straight through to the city of Elbeuf. And I believe that Elbeuf falling to 99th was another first. I think it was the first city on the Sun River to fall. And I was, at this point, transferred from C Company to headquarters because I was the only person that the tank commanders and 2nd Armored could understand. The Norwegians spoke with such an accent, and there was so much static on the radios that they had to have a clear voice. And so they made me the 300 radio operator for C Company for an interim period. And what happened at Elbeuf is that Colonel Turner, his name was, and Colonel Turner said to me, he said, well, it's up to you, you got the radio, you got to get contact, we got to have help. We're being counterattacked here in Elbeuf, and we got no heavy equipment down here to repulse the tanks. And I tried, and I couldn't, because of the terrain, I couldn't make the waves, radio waves work. So he said, well, now it's up to you to get us out of here. And I had to go alone through unoccupied territory. We had no idea what it was. And I had to go alone and find elements of Combat Command B and bring our tanks into Elbeuf to rescue the battalion, which was now trapped down there. And this was rather harrowing, but it turned out to be uneventful. But as I went through this undisclosed, unused territory, 3 Frenchmen came out of the bush. They were Free French soldiers. They had armbands on. And they said, let me help you. And I'm carrying this damn 9.5 pound Gerd, which I should have just left home because all alone I'd have been useless as a soldier anyway. And they put their arms around me. One guy carried my Gerd for me, and they helped me up the hill to get out of Elbeuf. And they knew where the forward command for the U.S. Army was. They didn't know who it was, of course. And they got me to that outpost, and they immediately sent for a commander, and they formed a tank column with a Sherman equipped as a bulldozer.
Oh.
And that led the parade down the road into Elbeuf. Of course, Elbeuf was down, it's a 400-foot drop from the top, and that's why they used us to do it, was because we went over the cliff into Elbeuf. But we had 3 infantry companies down there with no heavy weapons. And so my mission was to get some help down there immediately from Combat Command B, tell them what the situation was, and so on. Well, on the bridge where the road crossed the railroad, they had left 2 German Panzer tanks and several half-tracks, all in a pile on top of the bridge. There's a barricade. And that's why they had once I reported this to the captain of Combat Command B, he sent for the bulldozer. And he led the column into Elbeuf by pushing that stuff off the bridge. And it was quite harrowing, but never, the road was guarded by a German Tiger, and they fired 3 times. And they hit the pile once, and then the Tiger pulled back. And we later found out all they had in Elbeuf was 5 or 6 Tigers or Panzer tanks. They didn't have any infantry down in there. So we had no power, they had no men. So it was a standoff, and the battalion was never in any real danger down there because these tanks couldn't do anything. They'd drive up and down the street, and the minute they'd get a Molotov cocktail or something thrown at them, they'd pull back. And this Colonel Hansen that I talked about earlier, while I was away, he joined our C company where we were in Elbeuf. And he walked down the middle of the street with a .45 and fired his .45 at the Tiger, and the Tiger retreated. And so the conclusion that you make later is that they didn't have enough ammunition to shoot. They didn't, either were out or they were holding it back for a better target. But the tanks did eventually, when 2nd Armored came in to Elbeuf on the southwest road, the Tigers pulled back and they went north. And I don't know what happened after that. Colonel Turner got badly wounded by artillery in Elbeuf, and he was evacuated by helicopter. And Colonel Hansen got his battalion back, which we were all, you know, he was our guy.
Yeah, that must have been pretty unusual to be evacuated by a helicopter back then, right? There was, I don't think there was too many of them.
Probably not. The medics certainly had them.
Yeah.
And he was high enough ranked, you know, as a colonel. Whoever 2nd Armored, once they took over in Elbeuf, in their command, they took care of him, and I was back with C Company.
And then where did you go from there?
We crossed the Seine at Mons, and reformed on the other side of the Seine in a bridgehead, and from there broke out and went to Valenciennes. Well, we didn't have much heavy resistance. We some, but modest. And we stopped at Valenciennes and then turned east and went into Belgium.
Okay, and when was that? When did you arrive in Belgium?
Boy, I tell you, you got me pinned down on these dates. I'm gonna say it would have been late August.
Of 40,
third or fourth week of August. We went into Belgium, and then we did our campaign was through the canals. And I had another first. I was a water safety instructor. I'd gone to London for 7 days and learned how to be a water safety instructor. And so they made me point on the canal drive. And when we reached the canal, I had to jump in the canal and wade across it and climb up the other side. Fortunately, these canals were only deep enough for a boat to probably 3 feet of depth. But I think I crossed 4 canals that day. And then we went into position just opposite the border of Holland, about 1.5 miles away. And the battle for Arnhem and Nijmegen were going on at the same time that we went into position in far eastern Belgium. And we had with us a 7th Army tank that had run out of gas. The problem that Montgomery, in trying to go too far too fast, left a supply problem, a major problem. And they couldn't supply the U.S. Army to advance while they were sending all the supply they could get to the British at Arnhem and the Americans at Nijmegen. And I think it went down in history as a bridge too far. And it failed. The British lost a lot of people on the Arnhem part of it. The Americans did okay at Nijmegen. But we were left without supply and without any ability to continue our drive. And we captured a ferry across the Meuse River that was powered by cables. And they had just set the keel, and it would go across the river into Holland, and they set it the other way, it would come back to Belgium. And those free Belgians held this bridge, and they sent myself, and because I could speak French to these people, and a Jeep driver, and we held this bridge for 8 days, this ferry, just two of us, along with 30 or 40 free Belgians. And they went over into Holland a couple times and got food. We had nice fresh food, and the ferryman's wife cooked for us, and we had a great time for 8 days. But then we got pulled out, and probably the 99th Battalion did its greatest job. And that's, we went through the cities of Geilenkirchen and Hosagenrath, and were put on line at about a mile short of the place known as Hell's Corners in Worsland. And this was the most shelled and bombed place, I guess, on the whole Western Front. And it took us 14 days to go that mile to take Hell's Corners. But 99th Battalion took Hell's Corners, and we closed the gap by linking up with the 1st Division.
Now, what about casualties? Were they pretty heavy?
Yes, yeah. We were the second lieutenant, or the second lieutenant, who was our third squad, our third platoon lieutenant, was taken out as a mental problem. He counted the number of times the building was hit that we were in, and he shook his head, and the helmet would go the opposite way. Every time he shook his head, the helmet would go the opposite way. And after he got to 155, they took him out. And that was how many times that building was hit by shells. I mean, it started out as a 3-story brick building, and it was just a pile of rubble at the bottom, and we had to tunnel our way out of it every morning. And we were so pinned down by the shelling and so on. But eventually, the A Company went up one side of the road, and C Company went up the other side. And we entered the buildings one at a time as we went up. They had all the cellars were linked by a hole, and the Germans could retreat out through the holes as we occupied the buildings. The 3rd Squad had the ground outside of the row of buildings that led to the 4 corners. And we reached the crossroad and went laterally on the crossroad and to link up with our B Company that had gone up the next street. And when we got into position and had taken, say, A Company and two platoons of C Company took 4 corners. And I say this was the most devastated spot on the whole Western Front. And
did you guys take any prisoners at all?
Oh yeah. But they didn't take many prisoners. They either were dead or they were pulled back. They didn't stay. And they killed a lot of people and took some casualties. We lost ours at the second. The lieutenant that replaced the one that went off his rocker was killed the first hour he was there. He didn't last an hour. Came from Fort Benning to us and lasted 1 hour. I mean, it was tough.
Now, what rank were you at that point?
I was a PFC
Mhm.
several times. I had trouble with these Norwegians.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, I was a young snot-nosed kid, and we didn't like each other,
Uh-huh.
except the other young guys that had been drafted. Of course, by then, the 19-year-olds were being drafted, and we had our replacements and a lot of the young Norwegian boys.
Now, all your replacements, were they Norwegian too?
No, some were, if it was possible, they were.
Uh-huh.
But we got Mexicans, we got I don't think we ever got any African Americans in our squad, but I would like to mention, well, I will get to that. We were taken offline. In the official reports, 30th Division is given credit for the link-up between First Army, U.S. First Division, and the 19th Corps. And we were taken from 2nd Armored and made part of, under the command of 30th Division at the time of Elbeuf, and at the time of Porcelain. And the official Army account talks of 2 soldiers from 30th Division going through no man's land and linking up with somebody from 1st Division. Our B Company linked up with 1st Division in a solid line. There weren't 2 people walking through the bushes. And so maybe 30th Division's report is correct, but also so was B Company's report correct. Now, when you close a gap around a city like Aachen, you've got the outer line and you've got an inner line. The inner line is facing Aachen, the outer line is facing Germany. And we were on the outer line, so what they did on the inner line, I can't tell you, but 30th Division says they had 2 people link up, and I can't argue with it. But I know that at this point I had the platoon walkie-talkie radio as well as I was the lead scout of the 3rd Squad. And I could hear on my walkie-talkie the discussions between people in B Company, and I know they linked up. I heard it. But that, we held that position for about a week, and then we're put in R&R at Tilf in Belgium. And we were off the line. That would have probably been the first week of December. We were still in Tilf when the bulge broke.
Now, what about, at that point in time, it was getting pretty cold. What about your clothing and?
Yeah, we had our wolves by then. But when the bulge broke on December 16th, I was playing football with a squad from C Company against a squad from B Company in the village of Tilf. And we all of a sudden got alerted to get home and pack up. And by the time it was dark, we were on the road to Malmedy. And we spent overnight up on the hills outside of Malmedy because it had fallen to the Germans. The top column of the German army, the Panzers under Pfeiffer, had gone through Malmedy and on towards the penetration of the bulge. And at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, we were ordered forward, and we went down and retook Malmedy with virtually little resistance. There were some German, but most of their column had gone through. But of course, right out front of where we eventually located our B Company were the 136 soldiers that were massacred by Pfeiffer. And
Now, did you see them?
Oh yes, there were mounds in the snow. And B Company, Malmedy was a very vital thing, and for the record, the Germans came in 3 columns. They came on the south column, they got to Bastogne and couldn't get any further, and of course everybody knows about the resistance at Bastogne. The middle column had broken through, and there was no way to stop them. They went right through Houffalize and St. Vith, and all the way to the Meuse River, or very close to it. And the north column went through Malmedy and Stavelot. And we occupied Malmedy during the night and early hours of the morning of the 17th, and set up a perimeter with the 243rd Engineer Battalion, I believe it was, and the 292nd Tank Destroyer Company. Between these, the engineers and the tank company and our battalion, we closed off all the roads to Malmedy and held it for 16 days. And it was, we were attacked constantly. Mostly our B Company they were the ones that held the trestle over the railroad. And if the Germans couldn't get that trestle, they couldn't open the road. Mm-hmm. And the tank destroyer battalions knocked out 2 German columns that tried to come in because they had this position, incredible, right under the railroad, but stone columns on each side of the railroad that supported the trestle. And the tank destroyer battalions, all they had sticking out was their 76 millimeter guns. And they just stopped the German armored columns cold because they had perfect protection. Mm-hmm. And then when the Germans tried to do it with infantry, our B Company repulsed them. So mm-hmm. It was very successful. We were there 16 days. I was in the same hole for 16 days.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you were in a foxhole.
No, I was out front of the C Company. Uh-huh. And I had my second scout, we were buddies. Mm-hmm. He and I had a hole, and we dug into the side of a hill. The hill went up out of Malmedy, and we could look down on B Company, but we had a perfect spot. Incoming trajectory of shells couldn't touch us, and the only thing we had to worry about was a mortar, and we didn't have any of those at that spot. Mm-hmm. But we held that spot for 16 days, and then a battalion from 30th Division said, well, we're taking your positions, but you get our positions at Stavelot. So we swapped, and this sort of let 30th Division get organized. And we went into the same kind of an arrangement at Stavelot. And my second scout, myself, had the forward position for C Company at Stavelot, and we were there 16 days. And in that 32 days, I never washed anything, hands, feet, face. We had no water, no warm water, we could melt snow, but I was a mess. I had 3 pair of socks on that I never knew I owned. I just kept adding socks onto my feet. They were rotting from trench foot. It was very cold and very bitter, and we certainly didn't have clothes for camping out.
You didn't suffer from frostbite?
I didn't have any frostbite that I know of, but I did have rotting feet just because they were wet and dirty and so on, but they healed. But I had pleurisy so bad they had to stand me up for my 2 hours on. We could only take 2 hours at a time, so we'd do 2 hours on and 2 hours off in the hole. The official statement here is that the 99th did 101 days of engagement. Well, I don't know who the hell wrote that, but we were engaged from the time we got on the continent until the time we got off, because we were never out of artillery or mortar fire.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, 101 days is eyeball to eyeball. And that might be accurate, but if they want to count the number of days that we were under fire, to me it was 168 days of action and 320 days of exposure.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess that's conjecture. But after the balls, we were so decimated by illness and by fatigue that we were taken all the way back to Barneville and to guard against Jersey and Guernsey Islands, which we did, and the battalion reformed. And we got a lot of replacements and were made part of what is became known as the 474th Ranger Regiment. And this regiment consisted of the rebuilt 2nd and 5th Rangers and the 99th Battalion. And we went forward to AAchen from there and were assigned a 3rd Army where we finished the war. We went first to Bingen and across the Rhine, went on line at Frankfurt and penetrated all the way to Erfurt in Germany.
Did you encounter any POW camps or concentration camps along the way?
Yes, they took one man out of every company and sent him to Buchenwald to be an absolute living witness of what one of these concentration camps was like. And of course these guys came back, they couldn't eat for a week, they were so sick. It just decipated. And I guess I was lucky I didn't get that mission.
Yeah.
But I did have one last important mission that I performed, and which I have mixed feelings about. When we reached Regensburg on the Danube, we had been turned south because, being mountain infantry, they thought that there would have to be an assault on Berchtesgaden. And our battalion and the 2 Ranger battalions that were with us were the obvious assault force. And this never happened because the Germans never got out of Berlin. So Berchtesgaden just fell like a... And when we got to Regensburg, the mission of all of the Americans was to search houses, obtain weapons, cameras, anything of that nature, and destroy them. So we were standing on the edge of the Danube, breaking sporting rifles over a telephone pole and throwing them in the river. I mean, these were $1,000 rifles just being destroyed for no reason at all. And along comes a lieutenant in a command car. It was a 12-man squad car, actually. And he says, "Get in." And I said, we're here on duty. He said, "That's all right, I'm replacing you. I need you 3, and I need at least 3 more." And so we went to where the next place they were busting up rifles over a telephone pole or something else. And 6 of us with the lieutenant, and he was either a lieutenant or a captain, I don't quite remember, but and his driver, who was a sergeant. We drove out to a farmhouse, and this was on the north side of Regensburg, and he never said a word to us of what we were doing. He said, "I want you 3 on this side, and you 3 around the other side with somebody in the back." So 6 of us went out there, and he and his sergeant went to the front door. Well, when they went to the front door, 2 guys came out the back, and of course we apprehended them.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was Arthur Seyss-Inquart, the Vice Chancellor of Austria. And I apprehended him. I happened to be on the back where he came out, but they came out, they weren't either armed or made no resistance whatsoever, so there was no real problem. But we had no idea who we had captured until it was in the newspapers, who he was. The captain and lieutenant just said, this is somebody important, he's going back to intelligence. And the captain was from Army intelligence. And they knew where this guy was, and we went out and got him. And he was executed at the Nuremberg trials.
Oh.
So I said I always had mixed emotions about that.
Now, do you recall the death of President Roosevelt?
This would have been the day before D-Day,
Well,
VE Day.
Yeah.
This would have been May 7th.
Yeah, I think he passed sometime in April.
In April, he was gone, yes.
Yeah.
Of course, I, being an old Republican, cheered that. But
And now, when Germany surrendered, where was the unit?
we were at Regensburg.
Regensburg. Okay.
We were there I'd say we got there on the 5th maybe, and we were busy doing this cleanup of the searching houses and busting up stuff for 3 days.
Now, once the war ended with Germany, how were you treated by the civilian population?
We weren't there. We were immediately alerted for going to Norway.
Okay.
Because that's what the battalion was created to do, was to go into Norway one way or the other. We were immediately taken back to Le Havre and put on LSTs, and we arrived in Norway on the 16th or 15th or 16th of May. That's one day before Norwegian Independence Day. And I've been telling you, never saw such a celebration in your life. 5 years of German occupation was over. The Germans just quietly stopped in Norway and all reorganized themselves and stayed in their own camps. They didn't cause no problems. It caused problem for Gerd and her friends before we got there. But by the time we got there, things were pretty calm. And our duty in Norway was to take over the German positions on the hills around Oslo and make sure those guns were no longer available for use.
Did you have to blow them up?
We didn't. We just made sure there was no ammunition.
I see.
That was all removed.
Now, how long were you in Norway for?
6 weeks, 6 months.
6 months.
It took. We just helped the Norwegians get reorganized, get their police force. We were really police force while they got their police force back up, and of course it was a wonderful relationship. Our battalion were still 2/3 Norwegians.
Now, is that where you met your wife?
Yes, I met her on the hillside outside Smithstown School.
Huh.
And
Now, how did that come about?
I'll let her tell you.
Or he bribed my friends with cigarettes.
Oh.
So that he was invited to all the parties I was invited to. And boy, we had a lot of parties after the Germans left. So that's how it came about.
Now, what was life for you like under the German occupation?
Oh, oh, I can say it was fearful, but it was terrorizing. And we had so many directives and rules and you have to follow. And the way they punished people, they took 1 out of 10. You know, so random, and they shot them or they'd send them to concentration camp or whatever.
Did you have any family members that...
Well, I had a cousin who ended up in the concentration camp, and they broke every bone in his body, and he spent 15 years in the hospital
Oh, boy.
getting back. I mean the thing was, we couldn't believe, first of all, you couldn't believe that anybody would do this to other human beings. It was just nothing. And that, so when we found out that was true, it was just horrible. And of course, we had our little to-dos for the Germans. Like, we sang the national anthem, and God save the King, and they sent the Gestapo, and they pointed the guns on our back and marched us down the cellar. We were just kids. I mean, we were high school kids when all this happened. But it was incredible, the control they wanted. Everything they wanted to control.
Now your parents were still living at that point?
Yeah, my parents were living, and it was very difficult to get enough to eat. They had 3 teenage children.
Yeah.
And we grew, we had victory gardens, everything was right. Every lawn and every field was growing potatoes. And so it was every day, or going to school and having the teacher decide we should learn how to say Heil Hitler.
Oh.
Yeah, it's silly stuff. And of course we refused. And there they go again, sending for the Gestapo.
Now your father, was he working at that time?
Yeah, my father was a CPA for Bolinders. It was diesel motor.
Okay.
They produced diesel motors.
I see.
So he kept the fishing fleet going.
Yeah.
Which was essential for the people to eat.
So
Okay.
I can remember so many stupid things they did. Stupid.
Now, did you guys get married overseas, or?
No.
She had to finish.
I had to finish school before I could get married.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
We certainly planned to do it.
Yep. Well, I wasn't gonna quit because it's too. There's a real difficult thing I went through to get my education.
Now, how long were you in Norway for?
6 months.
And then you went,
They're back to Boston and was discharged.
and then you corresponded back and forth,
Yes.
and then.
Then I changed my mind a few times.
Now, when did you end up coming to the States?
In 47.
47, okay.
In July of 47.
All right, and you guys got married then?
Yeah.
But
And we had to be married right away because the church said so. We had to be married in the church.
we had to have six authorizations to get married.
Okay.
They had to have the parents of both sides and the nations, the nationality people, governments on both sides. And then we had to have the churches on both sides. Had a church on this side willing to do the wedding, and because she was Lutheran, in the Lutheran church, you had to be 21 or married in the church.
I see.
So she wasn't 21, so we had to have it all arranged ahead of time for the Norwegian church to give permission.
Now, were you out of the service at that point?
Yes.
When were you discharged, and where were you discharged from?
I was discharged, I think, from Camp Dix.
Okay.
but we broke up in Boston, and I think everybody was sent back to where they were inducted to be discharged. So I think I had to go to Fort Dix in New Jersey to get separated, and from there I went home.
Okay. And when was that?
Oh, it would have been right around the 1st of December in 1945.
Okay.
Yeah, because you left Norway in November.
All right, I'm going to stop the camera and switch tapes.
That's fine.
All the Norwegian told them to join the Hitler Youth,
Oh.
and the whole country went on strike.
So you didn't have to join?
No, but I don't know how many were arrested, how many were shot,
Uh-huh.
but yeah, I know the teachers didn't teach, and it was a mess.
Hmm.
But we didn't join the Hitler Youth. I don't know, we couldn't do anything else when the whole country refused.
Yeah. All right, and
Well, I would add that my wife, who's still my wife, she gave up everything to come to this country. She had scholarships to the University of Oslo. She was a very smart, well-educated girl who spoke 7 languages, and she gave up her family, she gave up her friends, she gave up her hometown and her country to come here. And so this is some tribute to this young
Sure.
lady. That we've had a successful marriage, we've had our children and grandchildren, and it's been a delight. And I figure that's my victory out of World War II, is that I captured this gal. And
now have you made trips back over there?
she's been back to Norway.
Yeah,
We've both been back to England.
But there's many left there anymore.
Yeah. Do you have some family that's still living there?
Very few of my family, of course, my mother and father. It's
Sure.
a long time ago since they passed away. And my sister, that was the one, and she died. I kind of lost interest in going back. She were the ones that shared everything, you know, they're
Sure.
all the same memories of
Yep.
what happened. And that was no longer there.
Okay.
When I was in high school, the only choice I had for a foreign language, which was required, was French. So I struggled through 3 years of French in high school, and never thought anything about it until they passed out the little French manuals in England, and then we knew we were going to France. And I read through the manual a little bit, and we got to Cherbourg, and I got duty guarding this hospital that I mentioned earlier. And a family lived right across from the gate that I was guarding, and they had a front porch with chairs and everything else, and they invited me to come sit with them on that porch, and I got to speak French with this French family for these 7 or 8 days that we remained in Cherbourg. And they helped me, and I taught them a little English, and we got along fine for those. I was on 2 hours on and 4 hours off, so every 2 hours I was back there, and we didn't speak French. And so we started taking prisoners, and they either spoke German or French. And if they spoke French, they needed me to interpret it, because no Norwegians ever learned French in high school in Norway.
Yes, Norwegian.
You did, yeah, but the high academic students did, and she would have been one. And so pretty soon I was speaking French with civilians as we met them, as we marched along the highways. I'd say hello to them, they'd come walk along with me for a little bit, and my French got much better. Well, so the Army, whenever they had some Frenchmen, they had something to tell them, they had to have me come and be the interpreter. So I'm now not only a radio operator, I'm an interpreter, and I'm a scout, and I'm a runner, and I'm everything I could think of.
But you were still a PFC?
And I'm still a PFC.
Jeez.
Well, there was no chance of anybody but a Norwegian getting any kind of promotion in that outfit.
Wow.
It just wasn't going to happen. As I said, if I could have been a black boy in a white prep school, I would have had the same reception I had there. And I said the victory being that I beat them all the way.
Well,
This worked out to be very wonderful in the town of Tilf, which when we were offline after Worsland. Some Belgian asked if there was a soldier in Tilf that could speak French. He'd like to invite him to dinner. And of course, I was the only guy they could send. So they called me into C Company headquarters and they said, we've got this Belgian that wants a dinner companion, and would you be interested? And I said, yeah, sure, I think I could, you know. And so away I went to this guy's, and he had a villa up on top of a hill, and he was a very wealthy Belgian, obviously. And it turned out he was the head of the company that built all the glass, stained glass for the cathedrals of Europe.
Oh.
And his company had been in business for 800 years and had been totally demolished in Liège by the heavy bombing. And he had no factory left, but he had me back almost, I guess I went back 3 times.
Wow.
To visit with this family, and so my French education in Johnstown High School turned out to be a real asset for me, and gave me a lot of pleasure in France and Belgium.
Now you had sent me a newspaper article.
I have it right here. Did I steal it back from you?
Do you need it back?
I didn't send it to you.
I was going to say I can make a copy of it.
No, I got copies.
We got lots.
I stole it. I was putting the papers all back together.
All right. Now, do you want to unfold that and tell us about how that came about?
Oh, okay. You want a picture of it or not?
Yeah. Just hold it up against you, because it's easier for me to zoom in on. Okay. And who is that gentleman with you?
That's Colonel Hojum of the Norwegian attaché from the Norwegian embassy in Washington.
All right. And you want to tell us? You can put that down.
Yeah.
Can you tell us how that all came about?
The Norwegian government decided that they should honor the living Americans that served in the 99th Battalion. And they had a big celebration May 30th or so in Washington, of which we were all invited to come to. And my wife and I felt that it was too difficult a trip for us to make. At our age, I didn't want to drive in that stuff, and it was Memorial Day weekend.
Sure.
I just didn't want to be involved in it. And we didn't know what it was all about, really, except that we were going to get a medal. Well, we didn't go. And a few weeks later, we had a notice that Colonel Hojum was going to come to our home and present us with the medal and a certificate hand-signed by the king, showing appreciation of the Norwegian government for the soldiers that had participated in the freedom of Norway. And lo and behold, this diplomat and his wife arrived at the Nick Stoner golf course and had called me on his cell phone to say he would be there at a certain time. And he and his wife arrived, and my wife and I received them in our camp on West Stoner Lake.
Yep.
And he presented this certificate of appreciation from the king and a nice medal of merit from the Norwegian government. And they were just lovely people, and this, of course, was delightful for my wife.
Sure. You got to speak Norwegian, right?
I really enjoyed visiting them.
Another highlight is that the person who was Prince Harold at the time was in her high school.
Oh, really?
They were high school companions.
Yeah. In my grade school, too.
And in your grade school, too.
Yeah.
So here's,
And
because this was not an ordinary Norwegian.
No.
She was a highly educated, very intelligent,
yeah, highly educated.
top drawer lady.
Now, once you were discharged, did you make use of the GI Bill at all?
I certainly did.
Okay.
I went to Syracuse University, and I spent a year there, and by then I knew that Gerd was coming, and that I had to have an education that I could earn a living with, so I went over to Hartford, and they paid me under another part of the GI Bill where you got $75 a month to learn your trade. Mm-hmm. And so I went on that program for whatever the year was, and they helped me get my education in the insurance industry. Mm-hmm. And from there I joined an insurance agency in Johnstown that I eventually owned.
His father was and owned it, so.
Oh, I see.
So,
Okay.
anyway.
Now, did you stay in contact with anyone you were in service with?
No.
Okay. So you didn't attend any?
I did, in a sense. I joined the 10th Mountain Division.
I see.
The 99th became officially part of 10th Mountain Division after the war. They said, well, we trained you and you did a great job and you really were part of 10th Mountain, so you should be officially made part of 10th Mountain. So that happened after the war.
Okay.
And I have had I wrote an article for the Blizzard, which is the 10th Mountain newspaper, mm-hmm. on the history of the 99th, and that was printed in the Blizzard. And I've kept in touch with them. I sent all my memorabilia to the 10th Mountain Museum in Denver, so they have all my stuff, including a machine gun.
Oh. How did that happen?
Well, it pulled apart. It was a French Moss 765 machine carbine, which nobody in this country had ever seen one. And it stripped down into 3 pieces. So I stripped it into 3 pieces and wrapped it in a box and sent it home. And I guess they weren't inspecting the mail very closely during the war, and my father got it, he put it back together, and it was on display in Johnstown for the rest of the war. Oh. And the state of New York told me I could keep it if I put a hot ball down the barrel. Yeah. And so they took it in and they disarmed it so that it couldn't, and sent it back to me. Mm-hmm. So then I had this machine gun that was totally immobile at this point. And when I offered it to the people in Carlisle, that's the Army Museum headquarters, they said, yeah, we'd love to have anything you got. So I wrapped up everything I had. I asked my grandchildren, my children, said, you people want any of this stuff? It was in a box up in the attic, you know. And they said, no, we'll never even look at it. Hmm. So I said, well, somebody will. And I sent it to Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and they sent it in turn to the Denver Museum. Oh. And so my stuff is all out there in Denver. Hmm. And I have had contact with the people in Carlisle, and I've had contact with the headquarters of the 99th Battalion in Minnesota. So I write to them regularly. And there's a fellow by the name of Tony Pisani who is in Oslo, and he works for a news organization in Oslo, and he's writing the detailed history of the 99th Battalion, of which I've supplied him much of the information that I gave in this interview. And, but I went down into details on the positions at Malmedy and at Cherbourg and so on. But I have provided a lot of the information that he will use on C Company.
Did you join any veterans organizations like the VFW?
Yes,
or
I'm going to one
Legion?
tomorrow. The veterans of the 10th Mountain Division are meeting at the Log Jam Restaurant up tomorrow.
Okay.
So I will go there.
All
Hope you join us skiing.
And of course, I wear all this stuff because
Sure.
the veteran skiers have privileges at Whiteface and Gore.
Oh.
And I have a lifetime pass at both ski areas.
Uh-huh.
And my skis are mounted in the bar room at Gore. And my best friend has one of the cabs on
Oh, really?
on the gondola at Gore.
Yeah.
And he passed away, and I stopped skiing after he stopped. My wife stopped before that. So everybody I skied with stopped.
Yeah.
So I said it's time for me to stop.
How do you think your time in the service changed or affected your life?
Well, I have to think that the intense training that I had as an infantryman gave me physical strength and coordination that stays with me till today.
Yeah.
And of course, you wouldn't have met your wife either.
Well,
right?
that was the greatest part of it. But I think that physically, the hard training gave me a hard body. And I think I benefited from that.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
But as soon as I got out of the infantry, I joined the Navy Reserve.
Oh, did you really?
I said I'll never be in another damn foxhole as long as I live.
Now, how long did you stay in the Navy Reserve for?
Certainly through the year that I went to Syracuse.
Okay.
I don't know how long your term is. Is it 3 years maybe?
Generally, with
I
the
never
Navy,
renewed it after it expired.
yeah, I think with the Navy it's like 4 years.
It could be I was in for 4
Well,
years.
the Korean War started.
Oh, I see.
Well, the main problem was that when I got out of the infantry, the Russians and the U.S. were talking about resuming a war between them over the boundaries that were agreed to between Roosevelt and Stalin and that. So it was before the Berlin blockade, but there was intense hatred between the U.S. And the Russians.
Yeah.
They weren't friends. They may have been allies, but they weren't friends.
Yeah, I think that was in 48, wasn't it? The Berlin airlift?
But
Yeah.
well, it was
47 or
before
48.
that. It was before that. Because I wouldn't have, well, I really joined the Navy Reserve just to make sure I couldn't be called back up in the Army.
You know, I remember everybody in Norway was surely that Russia and U.S. were going to go to war.
I mean, it was tense.
Oh, yeah.
You wouldn't remember that. You're too damn young.
Well, I'm 63.
Yeah, we'll try 87.
Yeah.
So, but I said I could feel awfully fortunate, and whether it was the Army training or whether it was my own outdoor living, because we've been very outdoor people. We both skied all our lives, and we built our own.
Outdoors.
We built our own log cabin up in the Adirondacks and put 7 additions on it.
Oh, oh my God.
And this is where he presented this medal. The background in these pictures is the lake beyond us, the West Stony Lake.
I was very involved.
Well, you can't see it from here. But those are trees on the other side of the lake that you're looking at.
Yeah.
So those that you wanted,
Yeah.
and this you want.
Oh, is that it? Do you have more of
I
those?
got another one.
I was going to say, if you want to donate that, sure.
Yeah. Oh, no,
Sure.
Yeah,
I
well,
brought
what
it
is
for
going
you.
to happen to this?
Okay. I'll stop the interview. Okay. Well, thank you for your interview.
Well, it was a pleasure, and as I said, I told Senator Farley, I said, I've never discussed my war experience with anybody but my wife and my family. And I said that I did out of concern. What am I doing?
What are you doing?
Well, I wanted to show them this. I wrote this out several years ago, and that's my own history of the war.
Oh, if you don't mind, I'll take a couple of minutes and copy this.
This you certainly can do.
Okay.
I may had to make a few changes on it because there's the things that are different, but that is much about what I interviewed.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
And I called it a private's view, and I hated the Army. I just hated them, but there were some very wonderful people.
Mm-hmm.
But the general idea that here we were, a democratic country, and we were volunteers to serve, and we were treated like shit because we were privates.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, this was very, very offensive.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But I got to tell you one other thing.
Ure.
We had a lieutenant. Don't you got the machine in?
Oh, you want me to
that's
start?
Right. No, that's okay.
Okay.
I don't care. It's the truth. We had a colonel. He was a major at the time, Major John. And Major John was an absolute bastard. I mean, there was never an officer so hated by the entire unit as Major John. He found a way to get away from the action whenever we were in action, and he would come back and treat us like a bunch of creeps. And one time we had moved out of Mons and were on our way to Valenciennes, and we were probably halfway, and we had to stop for the night. And C Company was out front, and the third squad was out front. And so we'd all dug our slit trenches in a row to guard on both sides of one squad was on one side of the road, and our squad was on the west side of the road to Valenciennes. And we dug a row of slit trenches, and I had the one closest to the road. And we had finished our slit trenches, and along comes Major John with his sergeant and a couple other people before him. And he says, "We're taking your slit trenches. We've got to stop for the night." And none of us said a damn word. We all pulled out our penises and pissed in our slit trenches. And one guy put his rifle across his slit trenches and took a dump. And of course, we all got busted. But this is a true story, and what we thought of Major John. And the final conclusion on Major John is that he disappeared from the boat on the way back to the United States. And there are many ideas of what happened, but there never was anybody to find fault with, because the companionways were guarded, and so nobody went up to the officers' quarters. So what happened, we don't know.
Ah, interesting.
And he disappeared.
Huh.
And that's kind of made everybody happy.
All right, thank you.